Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
3 million Hajj pilgrims begin journey to Muzdalifah. Israel considering settlement freeze in exchange for US military aid. And South Sudan begins registration for referendum vote. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
أهلا بكم إلى هذا المساء ونستهل جولتنا من حيث بدأ نحو 3 ملايين حاج.
Nearly 3 million pilgrims have started heading to Muzdalifah after performing Waquf Arafat, the most vital Hajj rite. Pilgrims to the sacred house of God perform the Maghrib and Isha prayers exclusively in Muzdalifah, where they will spend all or most of their night before heading to Mina on the first day of the blessed Eid al-Adha to continue performing the Hajj rites. Among them are stoning Jamrat al-Aqaba, slaughtering the sacrifice, shaving the head or trimming the hair, and circumnavigating the Kaaba. Joining us from Mount Arafat before heading to Muzdalifah is our correspondent Abdel Hamid Tawfiq. He will brief us on the atmosphere. We now go to Abdel Hamid.
In reality, we left the media center on Mount Arafat over an hour and a half ago, but the bus has still not moved more than 400 or 500 meters. There's a traffic jam that was probably caused by the simultaneous descent of all the pilgrims. However, after the main junction from the pure Mount Arafat, there are 2 other junctions, a bridge and a pedestrian passage, that lead to Muzdalifah. All pilgrims are aware that they should be heading to that area right now. The pedestrians are actively heading to Muzdalifah, but those of us in buses are barely moving. Overall, there's a lot of congestion in traffic. But right now, the pilgrims who decided to walk seem to be luckier than those in buses, especially after buses accumulated at one point. It doesn't seem like anyone is directing this traffic right now.
Thank you, Abdel Hamid Tawfiq from Arafat. Many scenes are emerging from the Waquf in Arafat, the diameter of which is not even 25 kilometers, but it is where nearly 3 million pilgrims gathered, making it an area with one of the highest population densities in the world. In addition, there is disparity in the condition of the pilgrims, especially between the rich and poor in relation to sustenance and transportation. Our correspondent in Mecca, Suhaib Jassim, provides a view into the pilgrims' movement and situation in Mina as they perform the Hajj rituals.
Many images were captured on the pure Mount Arafat, starting with the pilgrims' arrival from afar, as many of them came from the Mina camp on foot. After catching their breath, they were met with good deeds, such as those from the Association of Hajj and Pilgrims that offered over 6 million free meals. Officials in dozens of hospitals have confirmed the protection of nearly 3 million pilgrims from any serious epidemics that frightened their brothers in past Hajj seasons. Many medium or low-income pilgrims slept on the ground of Mount Arafat, forgetting themselves in their eagerness for what lies in their hearts.
Of course, Hajj is a struggle, so one needs to be patient. And our Lord accepts it. We need to be patient and endure it for the Almighty God.
Personally, I swear it makes no difference if I'm staying in a 5-star or 1-star hotel. It makes no difference at all. The more you struggle, the more your God will grant you, and God forgives everyone's sins.
A completely different scene was observed at what is known as the 5-star service camps. Here we see a minority of wealthy people who found a few moments of calm, devoid of congestion and traffic, to devote to sacred feelings. Everything is facilitated for them, and they are free to give their time to prayer.
Here we offer Hajj everything. Hajj for us here is 5 stars. We have tents, air conditioners, food and drink, and excellent air-conditioned buses. We offer pilgrims all amenities. And we say, may God provide us the Hajj service, and may we die serving Hajj, and our kids as well, the same way our grandparents did.
Another equally important mission is completed by security forces and volunteer scouts. Many pilgrims wander in search of their destination and take a long time to find the place they're looking for, the rewards of Mount Arafat. Here the travelers stop. Their voices rise, chant, and call for forgiveness, forgetting their struggles and troubles. Here the pilgrims' differences fade away as everyone gathered at this point prays and asks for the pardon of the forgiving Almighty. Sahib Jassim, Al Jazeera, from the pure Mount Arafat.
Keeping up with the Hajj season, an Egyptian school arranged a practical experience for the students to train them how to perform the rites of Hajj. The students came to the experience with joy and a desire to learn the rituals of this religious duty. The following report explains more.
في هذا اليوم الذي تتوجه فيه جموع الحجيج إلى صعيد عرفات الطاهر.
On this day, as the pilgrims in Hajj are heading up to Mount Arafat, all Muslims' religious sentiments rise high with them. They hope to be one of the pilgrims one day. An Egyptian school arranged a practical experience to teach the students how to perform the rites. Nile Garden School in Usim City conducted this practical experience with miniature replicas of Mount Arafat and Kaaba. The headmaster of the school said the purpose of this event is to strengthen the students' practical sense and religious feelings to be at the same level as those of the Muslim pilgrims in Hajj.
The point of what we're doing today is to help them understand Hajj through means other than the tradition of verbal instruction. When we show it to them, their understanding of the concepts becomes clear. They won't forget it, and it will remain as a beautiful memory. We get them accustomed to good behavior and the right religious performances.
The students say their prayers when they stand on the hill representing Mount Arafat. After they descend from the hill, they learn how to perform the visiting circumnavigation of Kaaba around the miniature replica of the holy Kaaba. This experience provided a special practice for the children, who often imagine the rites of Hajj in their heads before they are old enough to perform them in reality.
لم تحسم إسرائيل بعد أمرها من المبادرة الأمريكية لإعادة إطلاق مفاوضات السلام.
US President Barack Obama has praised Israel for showing willingness to study a US proposal to extend a freeze in settlement construction for 90 days. The new moratorium will not be subject to further extension. The US initiative, which the Palestinian Authority says it has not officially received, includes political and military incentives to Israel in exchange for a new settlement freeze in the West Bank, excluding Jerusalem. Abdul Latif Al-Omar reports.
The U.S. president, who just returned from a 10-day tour of Asia, has praised Israel for its willingness to study a U.S. initiative for the relaunch of peace talks with the Palestinians. Obama described the Israeli decision as promising and a constructive step, but not long before the Israeli mini-security cabinet has struck it down. The Israeli government held a meeting to discuss the U.S. proposal, which calls for a 90-day settlement moratorium in the West Bank. The Israeli cabinet said that they have not yet reached a final deal with Washington.
I will continue to stress the importance of Israel's security needs, both immediate needs and threats in the coming decade.
Israel has announced its conditions for the U.S. initiative, and until these conditions are met, the Hebrew state will not make a decision on the temporary settlement freeze in exchange for generous political and military incentives.
Somehow this week, the Prime Minister must approve this offer. For the sake of Israeli interest, we tell him to extend the settlement freeze for 4 or 5 months.
While the Israelis are studying the U.S. proposal, the Palestinians expressed anger over it, saying that they were not officially notified of its details. They described the offer as a bribe offered to Israel to make it meet its international obligations.
How can we commit ourselves to a settlement freeze that doesn't include Jerusalem or all the housing projects that began after the end of the first settlement moratorium on September 26, and which may occupy Israel's construction sector over the next year?
At least. Before rendering a decision on the new U.S. proposal, both Israelis and Palestinians are continuing to weigh their options. According to the U.S. proposal, Israel will receive immediate military aid in the amount of $3 billion, as well as security guarantees for 10 years in exchange for a temporary settlement moratorium, not subject to further extension. On the other hand, the Palestinians are being offered a promise of peace encumbered by a veto power, which the U.S. may exercise to derail any Palestinian effort to declare an independent state through the UN.
Diplomatic sources in Jerusalem are stressing today that there is no agreement yet with the United States on a 90-day housing freeze in the settlements, and that Israel and the U.S. are still working out the details. The sources said that Israel has several conditions which have not been met yet, and only when they are will the Prime Minister bring the issue to the Inner Cabinet for its approval. The clarification came after U.S. President Barack Obama praised Netanyahu for his efforts in moving forward the decision to freeze building settlement in Judea and Samaria, and for 3 months in exchange for a package of incentives from Washington. Obama said, "I commend Prime Minister Netanyahu for taking a very constructive step." The president added, "It's not easy for the Prime Minister to do so, but I think it's a signal that he is serious." Obama expressed the hope that Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas would resume direct peace talks without delay. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing stiff opposition within his own Likud party to a renewed construction freeze in the settlements. Earlier this afternoon, Public Diplomacy Minister Yuli Edelstein met in his Knesset office with several Likud Knesset members who, like Edelstein, strongly oppose a new 90-day freeze. IBA's Aaron Viner was at the Knesset and heard from 2 of the participants.
7 members of the Likud faction in the Knesset met right now to discuss the problems arising from the continuation of the freeze. There is a consensus among all the participants that the freeze is dangerous, not just for the residents of Judea and Samaria, but to the strategic goals and to the negotiations themselves. We are going to act in order to persuade our colleagues in the government and in the faction that the freeze is not Israeli interest or Middle East interest. We are going to try to collect signatures of the majority of members of Knesset of the Likud to explain to the Prime Minister that the faction objects the continuation of the freeze, and I sincerely hope that in the next 24 or 48 hours or whatever we have before the vote, we'll be able to persuade at least some of our colleagues to vote against this option.
This party was elected in order to make the settlements in Judea and Samaria stronger, not to make it weaker. And at the moment what we see is a decrease, legitimation of the state of Israel to build even in Jerusalem.
Today we are meeting here members of Knesset from the Likud, telling the Prime Minister to stay loyal to the Likud platform, to stay loyal to what we promised to the voters only 18 months ago.
Afghanistan's Taliban leader, Mullah Muhammad Umar, said his group remained utterly opposed to peace talks with the government. He reiterated that militant group would never talk with what he called a corrupt puppet administration while foreign troops remained. Military and civilian casualties are at record levels, despite the presence of about 150,000 foreign troops. A U.S. military base in eastern Afghanistan was on fire in the latest insurgent attack. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack in the city of Asadabad, saying they fired a rocket at the base. NATO forces have stepped up operations against the insurgency, while insurgents continue to target coalition forces. 5 foreign soldiers were killed yesterday in combat in the deadliest single attack in 6 months on the NATO-led operation. On the same day, several fuel tankers were set ablaze near Jalalabad by a mine planted in one of the trucks. In neighboring Pakistan, a bomb blast killed 2 people and wounded 3 others on the outskirts of the northwestern city of Peshawar. The blast took place in the main square of Adizai, some 20 kilometers south of Peshawar city. Local television reported the bomb targeted a vehicle carrying the head of the local tribal committee. The committee is comprised of family members of an anti-Taliban mayor who was killed last year in a suicide attack. The mayor of Matni village was killed visiting a market crowded with people and goats being sold for the Muslim festival of Eid al-Adha. With Pakistan facing a stubborn insurgency, Islamabad appealed to donor nations not to push the country to reform its economy as it seeks support to recover from massive summer floods. Pakistan's finance minister has said the country needs all the financial help it could get since the floods inflicted almost $10 billion in losses. But donors' mistrust over the transparent use of money had slowed donations. Prime Minister Yusuf Ridha Al-Jilani said his government is committed to economic reform but that they would take time. He was addressing the Pakistan Development Forum organized to present Pakistan's post-flood plans to donor nations and organizations.
Be patient with Pakistan. We are a plural society trying to come to grips with our economic and social ethos. We look towards you for understanding and support. With each one of you by our side, we can tell the people of Pakistan that they're not alone in their quest for economic prosperity and stability.
Even before the floods, Pakistan's economy had troubles surviving with the help of an $11 billion emergency loan secured from the International Monetary Fund 2 years ago. Donors say while they are willing to help, Pakistan must take steps to reform its economy and generate resources of its own. At the meeting, U.S. Special Envoy for Afghanistan, Pakistan, Richard Holbrooke, announced that his government would fast-track $500 million for rebuilding efforts.
As a demonstration of the United States' sustained commitment to expanding and continuing our partnership with Pakistan, and in close consultation with our Congress, the U.S. will fast-track up to $500 million of our first year of the funds provided under the Kerry-Lugar-Berman legislation. That would be 1/3 of the $1.5 billion for the civilian assistance in the first year.
أهلا بكم. دعا رئيس حكومة جنوب السودان سلفا كير إلى الإقبال بكثافة على التشجير على اللوائح.
President of the Southern Sudan region, Salva Kiir, appealed to Southerners to sign up en masse to participate in the referendum scheduled to take place this coming January. He said that the referendum only happens once. Salva Kiir said this as voter registration kicked off in all provinces of northern and southern Sudan. Head of the joint UN African Union mission in Darfur, Ibrahim Gambari, warned that tension may rise as the referendum approaches.
ابتداء من اليوم وحتى الأول من شهر يناير كانون الثاني المقبل حوالي 5 ملايين من سكان جنوب السودان.
Beginning today through January 1st, 2011, about 5 million residents of southern Sudan are invited to register for the referendum through which they will decide whether to stay in a united Sudan or part from it. The Referendum Council is working diligently for the success of this event. More than 100,000 employees will participate in organising the voters' registration in nearly 2,800 ballot centres available to the Southerners. Despite all these efforts, there are still many complications around this referendum, especially as its scheduled date, January 9th, approaches.
الكثير من العقبات تحيط بذلك الاستفتاء خاصة مع اقتراب موعده في 9 من شهر يناير المقبل.
The most prominent problems are how to determine who should participate in the referendum and how to decide on the fate of the disputed region IBA, especially its oil revenues after the referendum. On the eve of the constituents' registration, the African Union Supreme Council tried to settle these problems by announcing that authorities in the north and south had reached a framework agreement. According to the agreement, the two sides will not resort to violence to settle their disputes and will immediately start drawing the border between north and south.
يتم بموجبه عدم اللجوء إلى العنف لحل الخلافات والبدء الفوري بتحديد الحدود بين الشمال والجنوب.
The agreement also includes an article that allows the northern nomads to herd their livestock in the south. It also includes a pledge to guarantee Sudanese citizens the right to lodge in either the north or the south.
المواطنين السودانيين بالإقامة في الشمال أو الجنوب. ورغم هذه الإيجابية في بيان
Despite all this positivity in the Council statement, political analysts believe that the referendum could lead to a new round of conflicts in the country, which is at risk of a political disruption. The referendum is being conducted according to the peace agreement signed by the Sudanese government and Sudan People's Liberation Movement in 2005. Naseem Ramadan, BBC.
Well, in some other news, Amnesty International has accused the European Union of failure to hold its members accountable for collusion in U.S. rendition programs. Investigations have revealed that several European countries were involved in the CIA's secret detention program in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks. Countries including Germany, Italy, and Poland have been accused of hosting secret CIA prisons or allowing flights carrying detainees to use their airports. Many suspects are alleged to have been taken to other countries where they were tortured or disappeared. Amnesty has called on European governments to ensure justice for those involved in illegal CIA activities. Joining me now on the phone from Washington is Brent Podolsky, columnist with the Hill newspaper. Let's begin with this fact that a lot of people have been tortured as a result of these CIA renditions, as you have heard. How could the lack of action on the part of the EU be explained?
Well, these are very difficult issues, and the people deciding these are all politicians, basically. And when you have an ugly issue, as torture is, the political systems generally, in all countries, have difficulty dealing with it. I do want to give President Obama credit for not doing waterboarding and not doing some of the torture that had happened under the previous administration, which I opposed those actions all along, and I'm glad they've been changed. But I think we all have to do a lot better, including the U.S., including the Europeans, including countries in different regions of the world, to prohibit torture.
أكد التقرير السنوي الصادر عن منظمة الشفافية الدولية أن 70%
An annual report from Transparency International said 70% of Egypt's government employees were hired through nepotism and favoritism. Meanwhile, the unemployment rate is rising and millions of people are out of jobs.
لم يقف الفساد في مصر عند حدود تمرير المشاريع وضياع المال العام.
Corruption in Egypt does not stop at illegally approving projects and wasting public money, but extends to every aspect of a citizen's life, including his or her employment. Egyptian citizens are suffering from an unemployment rate as high as 9%, and government positions have become reserved for those close to the rich.
وبحسب تقرير صادر عن منظمة الشفافية الدولية.
According to a recent report released by Transparency International, 70% of government employees obtained their positions through nepotism. Moreover, experts believe that nepotism and favoritism are not only used in hiring practices, but also used by some people to obtain construction licenses or illegitimate deals that cost the country 18 billion Egyptian pounds every year.
بما يكلف الدولة 18 مليار جنيه سنوياً.
Among the things tainted by this kind of corruption are illegal construction licenses, illegal licenses for banned commodities, illegal land trade, and illegitimate profit from public positions.
تشهد الأسواق في اليمن لا سيما تلك الخاصة بالملابس إقبالا.
Markets in Yemen, especially the clothing markets, are seeing a lower rate of purchase in this blessed holiday of Eid al-Adha in comparison to Eid al-Fitr. This is due to higher prices and citizens' low financial capability. They are suffering from a decline in their purchasing ability amid major inflation and low economic growth.
وانخفاض معدلات النمو.
تشكو العائلات اليمنية من الارتفاع القياسي في أسعار.
Yemeni families are complaining about the high price of regular clothing, which has risen 30 to 50% in comparison to last year. The merchants believe this is because the countries of origin have raised their prices for the products, especially children's clothes, which is the most imported commodity. The prices of these imported goods are rising like a rocket. The situation prompted families and people with limited incomes to forego the large department stores and head to local markets and wholesale dealers, where clothes made in China and Taiwan are relatively cheaper to buy clothes for the holiday. Here, some analysts blame relevant government institutions for not putting a ban on raising prices, especially when sellers are actively raising the prices of whatever is popular with consumers. However, some economists have another theory to explain the rising price of clothes. They believe that sales for holiday clothes are rising during this period of time because of Eid al-Adha. So the increase of demand led to the rise in price. The rising price is not only decided by the sellers, but also because the tariffs are high in order to import the goods into the country. Oftentimes, these imported goods have to go through more than one country before they can reach Yemen. Therefore, they believe the economic conditions are responsible for rising prices.
The secretaries of a number of Egypt's youth political organizations held their first conference entitled The Vision of Youth for Change.
Most parties did not attend the conference, but it held discussions on important issues and different ways to deal with them.
Similar to the established parties' meetings, the youth from a number of parties exercised their right to meet, discuss, and analyze the situation. Young delegates from the Democratic Front Party, the Nasserist Party, and the Progressive Unionist Party came together for the first conference for Egypt's youth opposition parties. They are among the 24 parties that formed the foundation of the Egyptian political scene.
We had hoped for more participation from youth organizations, but unfortunately they are not present. We hope to meet with them in the future because I think this will become an annual conference.
While a number of parties were absent, the conference witnessed heated debates on 6 important issues.
Personally, I was preoccupied with 2 issues and thought they were really important to discuss today. I focused on them during the preparatory meetings. The first one is the economic and social conditions, and the second is secularism.
We call for a government that considers health, education, housing and employment basic rights to be provided to all citizens, not services that might or might not be provided by the state.
The issues that concern the Democratic Front Party relate to the education in the National Council for Youth. We believe that those 2 issues are very important and should be discussed. We need to relate the message that we are one nation. All the communities should be primarily concerned with Egypt, not anything else.
These issues don't differ from the party's official agenda, but the difference lies in the youthful ways in which they are tackled. The Young Opposition for Change discussed different issues, among them political, economic, and social rights, and held talks related to student life, university, secularism, and nationalism, and suggested recommendations. However, their suggestions are essentially impeded by the need for real evidence of the opposition's power on the street as part of a real campaign for change, and not just political objections. Mohammed Jamal, Nile TV.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible from support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news. Read our blog. Get transcripts of past shows and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs, programs which connect you to the world.